We're live? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, good evening, folks, and welcome to the Administration and Operations Committee for Tuesday, April the 20th. Attendance has been taken. At this point in time, Councillor Miller is not here. We expect him to be here, but at this point in time, he's not. Everybody else is in attendance. Anybody to add anything to the agenda? Okay, if nobody else has anything, Mr. Clerk, I have something that I would like to add under the in-camera section. I know usually it's not done like this, but this is something that just came to light today. So unfortunately, it couldn't be on the agenda any earlier than that. So I would like to add an item when we go in camera, if we could. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under other business, I have one question I'd like to ask.
Okay. Anybody else with additions to the agenda? Okay. With that being said, can I get somebody to move the agenda with the additional items? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Howes. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest, if there is, please do so at the time. Delegations and petitions, presentations. We do have Nathan Etherington with us this evening. There he is there. Nathan, the floor is yours. A reminder, you do have 10 minutes, and in the addendum, you'll know that we did receive the additional attachment from you. So welcome, and go ahead.
Perfect. I'll just ask the clerks to pull up my little presentation that I sent them. Thank you. So I'm just here to give a very brief presentation tonight regarding the report about our Pride Month activities. Next slide, please. First of all, this really started after we raised the Pride flag in 2019. In 2020, we started in January with an in-person event where we generated feedback from members of the community and asked for community feedback of who wanted to participate. We then met in February, and then in March, our world changed. So we had to adapt very quickly, and we were able to have a virtual flag raising as well as on the county webpage. We were able to have a Pride coloring page and some crafts, and as well the library shared some appropriate titles from their collection as well. So in 2021, we're hoping to build on some of that success. We have some Pride craft materials donated by Mary Maxim that will be available in craft kits for curbside pickup at the library. I've also reached out to the Bridge, and they have agreed to do a virtual safe spaces training, and that will be include trivia supported by the library. And then finally, our request for this year is for some Pride signage, which builds off of the Safe Streets campaign idea. And that basically is to have signs available for requests for residents to be able to erect on their line. They'll be able to submit a request on the county website and be able to pick those up at the county offices. So moving forward, we hope to galvanize some more effort from the community when we are able to meet in person again. And so we have a little Pride Facebook group that we have created. And if you click on that link in the agenda, you'll be able to see and join our Facebook group, and that will be able to communicate with members of the community about what we're doing in our upcoming events in our virtual year. And with that, I thank you for your time, and as well, thank you for your support from our request last time for the Pride Crosswalk downtown Paris. And with that, I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to Nathan. Nathan, thanks so much for, I'm not sure, oh, there you are. I would just want to thank you, first of all, for making this, and also for remaining chair of our Pride Committee during what must have been a very difficult 2 Prides now, where we've been going up and up and up, and then we can't have the traditional sort of celebrations that we had one time. But what I wanted to ask you was, would the Pride Committee have the capacity, or would they be able to take on some volunteers who might want to help deliver signs for folks who can't come to one of our offices to pick those signs up? Because I know when we were doing the Safe Street signs, the councillors were pretty inundated, and I'd be happy to volunteer a little bit, but it'd be great if there was volunteers who wanted to help out as well.
Yeah, so I did suggest this as well to Jake. I forgot to do my nod out to Jake there as well. Jake has been so great in helping support us and giving us what support they can from the county. And so I suggested that to him originally, that we would have volunteers be able to go around and put them up. And he was the one who suggested the customer service offices in Burford and Paris. I understand now those services are not currently operational given the lockdown. However, if something needs to happen there, we'll find a way of making it happen with volunteers if that's necessary as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, Mr. Miller has joined us. David, welcome. Any other questions for Nathan? Okay, seeing none, Nathan, thank you. Oh, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What do you plan to put on the signs?
Yeah, so the signs should be a very simple design, just a pride flag, and then I suggested a message like "Celebrate Pride in Grant" underneath with that typical county grant kind of font.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you very much, Nathan.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. So how does committee want to deal with the delegation? We just have the one. Councillor Ferrier?
Yeah, I guess, do we need to move to, and maybe this is to you, Mr. Chair, or clerk, if we want to actually have action on the signage, do we actually need to move a motion to approve signage for X amount of dollars, or is that inappropriate at this venture?
I'm not sure where the cost of the signs are going to come from.
Well, I'm fairly sure from the report it's already budgeted, so maybe we don't need to do that. And they're not asking us for the design approval, it doesn't sound like, so. So maybe just a move to receive.
Okay. Councillor Miller and then Councillor Wheat.
I'm just going to move, refer to the report, move to receive and refer to the report later in our package. But if that's what, I'll second Councillor Ferry's motion on that.
Okay. Councillor Wheat.
Second what David Miller just did.
Okay. So we've got it
later on.
Moved and seconded to later on in the agenda. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, adoption of minutes from the previous meeting.
Point of order. Just again, Mr. Chair, I think this happens sometimes, but I have a feeling Councillor McAlpine was supportive of that, but because he has a slight internet delay, sometimes it may look as though he's not supportive of something. He voted against something instead of for something. So maybe we need a moment before we move to the nays for lagging internet, or else it might appear to be something that it isn't.
Certainly. Okay. Moving on to section 5, adoption of the previous minutes, the committee minutes from March the 16th. Can we get a mover to put it on the floor? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Wheat, any questions regarding those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Any business arising from those minutes? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to pick up on item 7.1.3 with regard to Trillium Way, I raised the question that was in the minutes at the last Social Services Committee, and we were told we could expect a report at the next Social Services Committee in early May.
Very good. Thank you for that. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I think Councillor Ferrier, I always thought Councillor McAlpine was voting against the minutes, but I guess it's the delay. Last meeting, we had the St. George wastewater servicing presentation or report, and I was looking to get a summary of the costs, like the accounting up to that point of what we spent. And if it's come across my desk, I apologize, but I have not seen that so far. And that was something staff has told us they could get to us. So I'm just wondering if anybody put those numbers together, and or when can I expect it, or we can expect it. Thank you.
Anyone from staff able to speak to that? Mr. Walton, hate to put you on the spot.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Miller, we haven't got that together yet, but we should be able to do it in the next, this week's very busy, but maybe the next 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on. Consent items. 7.1 consent items to be approved. RPT-21-89, the tax ratio in small business subclass. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor? Councillor Wheat, Councillor Gatward. I'm not sure if somebody is going to speak to this report. It's pretty self-explanatory. Is there any questions on the report that we need staff to answer? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. In respect of the table that's contained in the body of the report, perhaps staff could help me. The property tax class of multi-residential attracts different rates from new multi-residential, and I'm not sure quite what the difference is there. And in the case of multi-residential, we're way outside of the provincial target rate. Is there just a typo? Maybe I've missed something.
Who can speak to that from staff? Heather?
Mr. Chair, Christine is on the line. She's just having some internet trouble. I'm not sure she can answer with no video or not.
Yeah. As long as she has audio on,
Sorry,
she should be able to.
There she goes.
Christine, go ahead. Well, maybe not. Heather, are you able to answer?
I actually do not know the difference between between multi-res and new multi-res. I'll see whether I can get that answer from Christine.
Okay, good.
She's typing now, so.
Okay. Just while we're waiting for that, do you have an additional question, Councillor Bell, or?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, so just while we're waiting for that, any other questions on that report? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think 1.7 is an error because it's repeated on the agenda and in the actual report. And I think that it's higher than residential, but lower than others. And if you understand how these tax ratios are arrived at, it makes sense to me. And I did talk to Christine about the small business subclass, and at this point, since the province has not officially approved it, we can't do anything anyway. So, it's Christina.
Appreciate that. Christine, are you with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Okay. So the ratios in the chart are correct. There is a difference in the new multi-res because in 2017 we passed the optional class for the new multi-res. So anything that's built would actually be, since 2017, would be charged the lower rate, with the option of moving the other multi-res eventually to the same ratio. Okay. Sorry, I didn't get all the other questions because my internet's cutting out. So if that could happen.
I think that was the question from Councillor Bell. Are you good with that? He's given the thumbs up. So I think we're good with that. Appreciate that. Okay. No other questions for the report? Okay. Seeing none. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That is carried. Okay. Moving on to 7.1.2.
I'll check out Mr.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Miller.
Chair on this one.
Councillor Miller declares on 7.1.2, 2021 budget adjustment for the John Noble home. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Gatward. There is a recommendation there. Do we have somebody to speak to it, or do we just want to have questions? Any questions on the report? I am seeing no questions on the report. We have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? Recommendation is carried. 7.13. We'll wait. Okay, Councillor Miller's coming back. Perfect. 7.1.3, the Drainage Superintendent Services. For Mr. Walton, there is a recommendation there. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor? Councillor Week, Councillor Miller. Any questions on that? Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Rob. I'm pleased to see that within the report you've suggested that there will be a proactive approach to drainage, and it'll be incorporated with the asset management scenarios that we have. My question is this. There's a person dedicated to the drainage superintendent's position from Burnsides. Would it be correct in calling that individual the drainage superintendent, or is the drainage superintendent actually the consulting service?
Mr. Walton? Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Chambers. When the bylaw is brought forward, it'll be the company that is actually named as the drainage superintendent. But when we put the paperwork to the ministry for their approval, it will be the person named here that will be the actual superintendent. That person will provide the majority of the services, but this firm has a number of people which can provide services to us. So in the case that somebody was sick or whatever, there's no problem with us using anyone from that firm. So it actually has a lot of advantages to us. And one of the main advantages we have in this particular situation is the person does live locally. So it's, we aren't going to have a lot of mileage. So.
Good. Councillor Chambers, follow up? And then
yes.
Councillor Gatward.
Yeah, just run a scenario by me where on Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, there's a tile blowout that's endangering a crop, and a person, the landowner calls the councillor to find out who they're supposed to call in a drainage emergency situation. Who do I tell them to call, and can you follow how that will eventually lead to a response to the property owner with his drainage problem that needs to be rectified, not Monday morning at 8 o'clock when Burnside's open, but Saturday evening at 5 minutes after he's called?
Through the chair to Councillor Chambers, this portfolio will be managed through our roads division, and the call will go through to the roads division, and then they'll get the appropriate people out there if required.
So I would tell the caller to call the county number, and the dispatch would connect him with the roads, would connect him with the drainage superintendent, who would then marshal the contractors to correct the problem. Is that how I can explain it to the people?
That's correct. We'll use the 24-hour, 365 days a year answering service that we have, and that's how it'll be managed after hours.
Perfect. Thank you. That sounds
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. So my question is similar to Councillor Chambers. If we have an ongoing drainage issue within our ward and things aren't happening, do we email the former drainage superintendent at the county and he emails Burnside's, or can we email Burnside's directly if it's a weekday during business hours?
Mr. Walton.
Through the chair to Councillor Goward, what our preference would be is that you put your inquiries through Jason DeMonk, and he will deal with our contractor here.
That's via an email or a call, sorry.
Either or.
Yeah. And if he's on vacation, will somebody be taking those calls?
No, but if he's on vacation, he should have an out of office on his phone and on his email.
Right. So then we could call you and you could fix it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to 7.1.4, RPT-21-106 for the payment markings. There is a recommendation there. Can I get a mover? Councillor Laferriere and Councillor Howes. Any questions on this report? Councillor Laferriere.
Just a quick one through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. What's the process for deciding what we aren't going to do because of the budgetary difference? You know, I imagine safety is probably the number one component, but just wondering what the process is to figuring that piece out.
Through Councillor Laferriere, or sorry, through the chair to Councillor Laferriere. Actually, there's some contingencies already in this contract for things we won't necessarily do the whole amount of anyways. So we feel that we can award it. The staff originally came forward, and there's two parts to this contract, and they originally said, let's just approve the one part of the contract. And I said, no, that's poor business, because then we'd be coming back next year to approve the other part of the contract on something that's a year old. And we're better to approve the whole thing now and get it done. And we can deal with this through the contingencies and prioritization of the projects. It's the amount here that we're talking of, the difference here is quite small, and we should be able to do it no problem.
Great news.
Perfect. Any other questions on that report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to 7.1.5, RPT-21-112 for the community improvement application. There is a recommendation there. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor, please? Councillor Bell, Councillor McAlpine. Any questions on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to 7.1.6, which is RPT-21-113 for the detachment lease. There is a recommendation there. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Gatward, Councillor Bell. Cindy, I'm not sure if you want to speak to this report or just take questions. It's a solid report there. Is there any questions on this? Okay, seeing no questions, it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to section 7.2, we do have several recommendations. Unless anybody wants one pulled, they are to receive. I'd like to pull them all together. Anybody want anything pulled? Councillor Ferrier.
Yes, I'd like 7.2.5, suicide and crisis prevention hotline pulled for discussion.
Okay, anybody else want anything pulled? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. 7.2.3, please. The wastewater treatment plants.
Councillor Gatward.
7.2.7.
Anybody else want anything pulled? Okay, can I get a mover for 7.2.1, 0.2, 0.4, and 0.6? Councillor Miller and Councillor Coleman. Any questions on 7.21, 2, 4, or 6? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 7.2.3, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, Matt DeHont knows this very well. We have a regular complainant. And I'm not saying she's complaining without due cause. I'm sure she's complaining with cause. And my concern is that we have received many complaints from that particular resident, and we certainly haven't satisfied her. And I would like to know what it is we can do more than we're doing now to remove the odours that she regularly has in her house, in her garden, and in the neighbourhood.
Who can speak to that? Mr. Walton?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bell. So I'm well familiar with the subject you bring up here. In truth, my resident will never be satisfied until we make substantial upgrades to the plant under the Class A, which is going to start this year. So there are some processes out there that, like the digesters and other of the processes that kill the tankage and and odor controls put on them, that they will never be satisfied with, whether it meets the criteria that others would be satisfied with or not. We've been dealing with this for a long time, and many times we get the complaints. There are no other complaints, and there's no malfunctions at the plant.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think the fact we get a lot of complaints from one or two people, I put that down to them being interested and concerned citizens, and perhaps other people don't just give up and say nothing's happening. But there must be a way to help her and other people that complain to understand what the causes of the problem are. Even if we can't solve them, at least to understand them, to give maybe a heads up if we know something is going to happen. For example, if we bring in more trucks from the Biggers Lane landfill, just to give appropriate heads up.
Respond to that, Mr. Walton?
Through the chair to Councillor Bell, all of the activities that happen at the wastewater treatment plant are ongoing, continuous activities. So unless there are terrible equipment malfunctions, there's nothing that goes on down there that's out of the ordinary, unless we were into some specialized rehab processes or a digester clean out or like. And if we were into those, we would notify the neighborhood that they were going on. And quite frankly, we are in constant communication with this one landowner. Constant.
But we're not solving the problem. So I think
I told you before, there's no way to solve this problem without doing massive upgrades at the plant. It'd be like telling somebody that they want the odor from their next door neighbor that has a pig farm changed. Until you move it or do something to take the odor away, nothing will happen. So here, the odors are low level, mostly. And
I would agree with you if it was persistent, but it's not. It's sporadic. So there are particular episodes that cause the problem. And I don't think we've been able to diagnose what causes the problem.
I have no response to that. Sorry.
Anything else for 7.2.3, Councillor Bell?
Nope.
Okay. 7.2.5, Councillor Ferrier?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. After speaking with the clerk and speaking with Councillor House, who'd like to second this, I was wondering if I could move that the County of Brant supports the resolution of the Town of Calden endorsing the 988 Crisis Line Initiative, and that also be sent to the Federal Minister of Health, Patty Hadju.
Okay. So you do have a seconder, Councillor House? Okay. So bear with me, Councillor Ferrier. I'm going to go to 727. We'll get rid of the receives and then we'll circle back to that. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So 7.2.7, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we've spent a lot of time lately reading about cannabis, and this kind of put it in a nutshell. In my opinion, this was said it all, and I like this letter, and I like the motion, and I don't know if the rest of council wants to support this motion or send a letter to those concerned. Again, the Honorable Patty had you that we at Brant also support all the initiatives Town of Fort Erie has in this letter about cannabis.
Okay, so you want to make a motion to send that one further as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do first of all, I'm going to go back to 7.2.3, which was just an item to receive. All in favor of 7.2.3? Opposed? Carried. 7.2.5, Councillor Ferrier, you wanted to make a motion to send that on. Please repeat your motion.
That the County of Brant supports the resolution of the Town of Calvin endorsing the 988 Crisis Line Initiative, and that be forwarded as well to the Minister.
Okay, and Councillor Howes is seconding that. Any questions on that? All those in favor of that motion? Opposed? That motion is passed for 7.2.5. 7.2.7, Councillor Gatward, what's your motion?
That the County of Brant supports the cannabis licensing and enforcement correspondence from the Town of Fort Erie and the Township of Brock, and that a letter be forwarded to the Minister of Health.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Coleman. To the clerk, you got that motion? Adam?
Sorry, I'm trying to find my mute button. Yes, I did. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Any questions regarding that motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, thank you for that, folks. We're moving on to staff reports. 8.1. RPT-21-94 River Access Report. Quite a large report. Mover to get it on the floor, Councillor Wheat. Seconder, Mayor Bailey. Cindy, did you want to speak to this report before we have any questions? Is there anything you want to send her out or?
Good evening to the chair and members of committee. The report was sort of a compilation of a lot of work from various departments in response to the delegation that came to committee last month and the direction that we received from council. We have put together what we think is a solution for this season, noting that it is a challenging kind of situation, and probably be, dissent and support for it from residents and tourists alike. And we're also talking about longer term solutions where we have a little more time to implement something that may be more effective in the long term. They're just at this point wasn't the turnaround time to implement things like a permit system. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions on that report? Councillor Howes, then Councillor McAlpine.
Yeah, first, thank you to everyone who was involved in putting this together. It is a challenging situation, and I'm sure we will try some things this year that we'll learn from and we'll modify as we go for the future. I'm looking at a satellite image of the Glen Morris portion of this, and I wanted to just clarify a couple things, and part of it, this might be for the benefit of some people who are watching who may not have read or have had access to the entire report. But just to clarify that the big parking lot near the rail trail is not owned by the county, it's owned by the GRCA. The two kind of gravel parking lots on Dunbar Street, the one that's kind of close to the corner of Dunbar and East River Road, and the one next to the community hall, does the county own both of those parking lots?
Cindy?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So your first comment, Councillor House, the parking lot that is at the end there of 4th Street is owned by the GRCA. That's correct. I'm not clear on ownership for Dunbar, the parking lot you spoke to at Dunbar Street East, or on East River Road. The parking lot by the community center would be a municipal lot. I'm not sure if any other members of staff would know the answer to your second question.
Okay, Mr. Chair, if I could continue a little bit. So it's while I think we're taking steps to improve the situations for the folks that live on Forbes Street, I hope we are. We're certainly going to be driving more people towards parking at these other parking lots. I think we should have some clarity on who owns them. And I guess my other question is for Cindy is, have we had any discussion with the GRCA about putting in paid parking there to tie into some kind of an online reservation system to try and manage the flow of people, or is that just impossible in the timeline with tourist season rapidly approaching and just something we need to look at for the future?
Cindy?
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. So with respect to a paid parking system, we did discuss that with a group of staff, and you're correct that the timeline for the turnaround on that just was not feasible for this season. It would involve, acquiring the system, and there'd be some back-end work to getting things up and running, administration, training. So unfortunately, we just didn't have the time in order to do that. I think, in exploring that as a long-term solution, we'll definitely be speaking with the GRCA and potentially trying to partner with them on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor McAlpine.
Yeah, there's been a number of concerns raised by the community in Glen Morris, and I'm kind of concerned. One was that we're charging the local residents to park and not charging the tourists to park, and it's kind of having a very negative effect on a number of areas, like we're thinking the library, the church, and the community building, what's been traditionally the parking for those particular venues. And I'm hoping that we can sort of maybe move to get more public involvement in the discussions and maybe look at some other options that might be out there. Because I think there's a number of areas that are also been affected by similar problems to this. I'm thinking particularly Webster's Falls in Dundas and how they've approached it with their parking systems. And I wonder if you've talked to them and how they approached it and what sort of things they've done, say, around the hospitals or around the university regarding parking.
Cindy, just before you go there, I think for the rest, Councillor McAlpine there, he's pulling from the extra communications we got The extra letters we got regarding the river access parking system stated a few of those things that Councillor McAlpine was saying there. So I think that's where that's coming from. So Cindy?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Staff have reached out to some of the municipalities that were mentioned by the delegation at last month's committee meeting to get an understanding of some of the systems that they've implemented. Again, those were all paid parking systems, and with the short turnaround time for this year, there wasn't sufficient time to get that put together for this season. You also just referenced, Councillor McAlpine, the charge to residents, and I guess under the current bylaw, which was set up for another situation on West River Street in Paris, the seasonal or the residential parking permit system sort of born from that, and it did include the $15 a month for any resident who did acquire a permit. So that is where that comes from, and it's currently within that bylaw.
Is there some way of doing something a little different here that would allow, because it's kind of unfortunate though with the way the parking's working, if they're trying to look at some way of limiting the parking for tourists and maintaining the public use of for the residents that live in the village there, so that they can say if they're having friends and stuff like that. So for instance, it sounds like you're putting limitations on the ability for people to, say, purchase a permit, or I'd almost prefer to see them given permits, maybe 2 per household, or looking at some other ways so that they're not overwhelmed by this issue.
Did you want to comment on that, Cindy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you know, if council would like staff to look at altering that residential parking system that we currently have in place, we could certainly do that. Potentially look at, you know, the fee that's involved. If council wishes to alter that, that's within your authority as well.
So I've got Councillor Wheat, Councillor Ferrier, Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I look at this report as a 3-part report: Glen Morris, Penman's Dam, and Bean Park. Now, I'm prepared to move a deferral on the Glen Morris portion until such time as staff have had an opportunity to consult with the residents, namely their representatives, Karen Murphy, and the other chap that was here with her a month ago. Now, seeking input from the parish councillors, because you're more familiar with Penman's Dam and Bean Park than I am. Now, whether you support my motion to defer the Glen Morris portion for further consultation between residents and staff, or you're very comfortable with Bean Park and Penman's, then I would only move the Glen Morris portion for consultation between the area residents and staff. I've spoken with area residents there today. Of course, I've been on this little project since I got on council, but they would really just like to have an opportunity to maybe tweak it a little bit or confirm what's come forward tonight. So I'd just like to defer the Glen Morris portion. If any member of the parish councillors who are familiar with Penman's Dam and or Bean Park would like to do the same, then I would combine it all into one. But Mr. Chair, if there's no request from Penman's or Bean to be separated, then I would say go ahead and call the vote on those 2, but I would make a motion to defer the Glen Morris report until staff has conferred with the residents in Glen Morris.
Okay, appreciate that, Councillor Wheat, and we'll see.
I know I may put you in an uncomfortable spot.
Nope, just hear me out here. So I'll circle back to you in just 1 second here. And I appreciate the fact that you can call for that deferral. That's fine, and we'll see in a minute here if you get a seconder. But my way of looking at it, I'll take Paris for example. As far as I'm concerned, with what is put in this report, that is going to help Penman's Dam, and it's going to help at Bean Park. As Councillor Howe stated, summer is upon us. People are going to start to use these launches, and from what we've heard from council over the last several years through council, through River Access Ad Hoc Committee, is the fact that these launches are crazy. People are parking everywhere, it's overcrowded, and that's their biggest concern. What I don't want to have happen is put a deferral to this, and then all of a sudden it's another couple of months before we get something in, and by that time it's too late because people have already overtaken these launches. That being said, you have the full right to put a deferral in there. So we will take. Does anybody want to second the deferral for Glen Morris? Councillor Ferrier.
Yeah,
okay.
Can I speak?
Just bear with me just 1 second here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the other Paris councillors. Do you want to add the Penman's the Penman's Dam and Bean Park to the deferral?
No.
Okay, I'm not seeing any of that. So the deferral is just for the Glen Morris. It has been seconded. Who wants to speak to the deferral? I'm going to start with Councillor Wheat, then Councillor Ferrier.
Perhaps, Mr. Chair, even if we put it off for 1 week because we have a council meeting next Tuesday night, a week from tonight, to give them 7 days to comment on. Can you live with that? And I would make that part of the motion.
I would suggest, Councillor Wheat, that they're probably watching tonight. So I
know Jeff
yep.
Later.
So hear me out here, and I know they are. So what I'm going to suggest is, and I don't have a problem with that, but what I'm going to suggest is let's not wait the 7 days to get the comments in. I know there's been a couple comments received already that are part of our addendum package that we have in there tonight, which is fine, and they're kind of speaking to where you and Councillor McAlpine were going with this, so that's fine. But if we are going to have it on our council meeting, just remember to anybody that is bringing the recommendations or feedback back to us, that needs to be to the clerk by Thursday. So, Councillor Ferrier, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. I think I can comment a bit to the piece here. Like I'm fine with the Bean Park and Penman piece. I agree with you that I think it makes sense. My issue, and the reason I'm okay deferring the Glen Morris section, is the parking permit, paid parking permits, because while I know the bylaw was for that piece on West River, and I'm very familiar with that, having lived there for quite a while. It's a different situation, right? The folks on West River, why they were needing to pay for permitted parking is in part because they don't have parking in that space, and it was about saving particular spaces. This sounds more like it's about paying to park on the street wherever you are able to, which is very different. And that sort of inequality between the resident who has to pay for a parking permit and the, as Councillor McAlpine said, the tourist who may not have to pay for parking, that I can see why that feels a bit lopsided and unequal. So again, kind of different situations, though both are a parking permit situation. I'm not against parking permits. In fact, I'd love to see them downtown for employees and owners of properties paid, because I think people would pay for those. I think in this situation, it almost seems like we're giving less service and less opportunity for residents for more money out of their pocket, and that part leaves me uncomfortable.
Okay. Anybody else with comments, questions to the deferral? So we're going to go Councillor Howes, then Councillor Chambers, then Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I share Councillor McAlpine's concerns about the paid part of the permit side of it. So my question is specific to if there's through the deferral process, if there's a change to the payment side of the permit process in Glen Morris, would that then apply to the other two areas as well? That's just, it's an interesting question, right? And I think, you know, I'm wondering, I think there's probably going to be folks on Willow Street who will be surprised to find that they can't park in front of their homes. unless they have a permit, because they didn't happen to watch this meeting or read this report. So there's some complications to this deferral. If the story changes for Glen Morris, will the story then change for the other two areas, even though they were not deferred?
That's a very good question, Councillor House. I would suggest that if they're not deferred, then it would be as the recommendation is written.
Right.
I'm not sure how else to answer that, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, it's already been said to Mr. Chairman. It would be unacceptable to charge the residents to park in front of their properties when we're trying to prevent out-of-towners from, or they're the ones that should be paying the permit fees, not the local residents. So it would be a matter of bureaucracy to waive the permit fees for the residents, and I think that can be done. And I think a little bit of work on that would make a lot of sense and make more sense to the residents that they wouldn't have to pay to park in front of the places whereby they shouldn't have to, and they never have. Those are my comments.
Okay. Councillor Gatward. Question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the issue of the parking lots and the ownership of those parking lots, and the residents' letter that came in stating there's events at the library, there's events at the community center, and so on and so forth. And right now, maybe there isn't events because of the pandemic. However, when we start to meet again, those parking lots will be needed by County of Brant residents who attend those events. So I'm glad we're deferring the Glen Morris portion, because I'd like to hear back who owns the lots for sure. And could we somehow implement this permit system? If we could implement it quickly to charge residents for parking, why can't we implement it quickly to park in the GRCA lot?
Cindy, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The setting up the system for visitors, I guess, so to speak, involves purchasing some additional software, setting that all up in the back end, training staff on the administration of it, communicating that. So there's just a lot of pieces to it that maybe isn't seen in the forefront, but there's a lot that goes on in the background to setting that up. Whereas the permit system for residents, we'd be sending out communication directly to the homes in that catchment area, which we have in our system, sending them a paper copy and having them return that. So it's much simpler to administer.
Certainly it is, but it's the problem that we want to address, which is the parking or the lack of, and collect the fees from the correct people. So have staff talked to GRCA? Do you know at all?
Cindy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff have been in discussion with the GRCA kind of, fairly regularly with respect to the lot down there. We've worked with them on expanding the parking lot, and we've had some discussion with them on, what the future might hold, but not specifically on implementing the paid parking system at this point.
Thank you.
So your hand up?
I think Michael Bradley's on, Mr. Chair, first.
Yep. I just want to make sure that there's no other first time rounds here. So, Mr. Bradley, welcome to the party.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to maybe just remind council something that we should keep in mind. The county doesn't have a paid parking system anywhere. We're one of the, probably of a municipality of our size, we're an anomaly in that we don't have any paid parking. So we have nothing to scale up. And I think, you know, if we had some downtown lots that had a paid parking system, this might be a bit easier. We could scale that system up. We would have the back end to process payments and fines and things like that, which we just don't have here. So I think it's important for council to remember that there's no existing system that we could rely on. We really have to start from scratch. And I think doing that in the time frame to be ready for summer is probably going to be a failure. So that's why we're recommending this other approach. So I just wanted to add that in case council had forgotten. It's something that we don't think of very often.
Thank you. Mayor Bailey?
Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gatward's comments too, the parking lot that's down at the end of Forbes Street is just not even close to adequate for the kinds of situations that the Glen Morris people are going through. It's truly a circus down there. And it got nothing to do with making that lot any bigger. That lot can't get any bigger now. It goes right onto a turnaround, and it's not just the parking that's the issue. I mean, that's what we're speaking of, but it's all the antics and the way people are speaking and treating people, and it's just really congested and very disrespectful. And if it were just about parking, we could do certain things, but it's something that's altering the lives of these people. And it's not going away. So we need to do something. I think deferring it is a great idea to give everyone a chance to comment. But as Councillor Howe said, you know, people in Paris are not going to want to pay to park in front of their house. It's just absolutely ridiculous to suggest that we might do that to them. So I'm not sure. I was in complete support of the deferral, Councillor Wheat. But I'm just not sure it's not going to just make everything muddy moving forward with Paris.
Okay, so we've been around the table a couple of times here. Everybody has spoken at least once, some twice, some 3 times. I'm gonna try and draw things in here. There's been some good discussion. From what I'm hearing, the biggest stick point we have here is the fact that we want to make sure that we are not charging our residents to park in front of their houses. I think that's perfectly clear, and I agree with that statement, whether it be in Glen Morris, whether it be Willow Street in Paris, whether it be in any of these areas that are, as part of this recommendation, as no parking. Although I think that this will be a benefit to the Penman's Dam and the Bean Park area, what I'm going to suggest here, and it's good we had this discussion, what I'm going to suggest is committee, does committee have the appetite to defer the entire report for the week and bring it back to council so we can have those extra discussions to give staff the time. Now, keep in mind, you know, like Mr. Bradley said, you know, there's nothing here that we have to scale up on. We do not charge for parking in the county. And also, as what was said, summer is going to be upon us. So I don't want this to go on too long, or it's going to end up backfiring on us. So I'm just throwing this out there to the committee. If anybody would be in favor of that, but I think we've had some very good discussion on this, and I think the points have been made. I don't think there's a need for further discussion other than the fact of, are we going to defer Glen Morris only, or are we going to defer the report? Looking for some input. Councillor House.
I would be prepared to approve the rest of the report if we, as with council, through a motion or whatever mechanism you can direct, if we change the permits so that yes, you need permits, but no, you don't have to pay for them. And if with that change made, I'd be prepared to approve the rest of it.
The rest of it, barring Glen Morris, or the rest of it, period?
Yeah, no. Well, if Councillor Wheat wants to defer the Glen Morris portion, I respect that. I don't necessarily believe that a week is going to be enough time to engage with people in all 3 areas. So I'm saying that Cindy mentioned that council has the prerogative to take away the fee within the permit system. And I think if you do that, then all of a sudden it works more smoothly. I think like our goal here is to manage where people park depending on where they're from. And our goal here isn't to make $15 a month off the residents. We don't care about the $15 a month. We want to manage where people park. And I think that can be achieved through the permit. It can be improved by the permit system. I just don't think we need to charge the residents to do it.
Okay, so that adds a little bit of a different flavor here again. Councillor Ferrier.
Yeah, I think actually from Councillor Howe's clarifying question in the first round, I think it makes sense to defer the entire report for now. With the push that, you know, I think staff has heard that yes, we want Glen Morris specifically to have some consultation, but also that council is leaning towards any solution that doesn't involve charging any of our residents for permits to park in front of their own homes.
I'd just like to say too that in the case of Glen Morris, in talking to the residents, they would prefer to wait like another month to have their input into this and have it done in even a week, to have that time to really see if there's some more novel ways of coming. So if that would be a friendly amendment to John's motion, then that would be appreciated.
Okay, so again, what I'm hearing here, bottom line is we don't want to charge our residents for parking. I think we all agree on that. And I also agree the fact that maybe a week isn't long enough to get input from the residents. That being said, you know, maybe there's no other input they have other than they don't want to pay for it. So I think if we're going to defer some of it, we should defer the whole thing. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate all the work that you and your staff have done on this, Cindy. This is a huge report and a lot of thought went into it. But so Councillor Howes, are you willing to move a deferral for the report, the entire report? And a seconder is Councillor Ferrier. You're willing to second deferring the whole report?
I think Mayor Bailey is seconding that. I was just scratching my face.
Mayor Bailey? You missed a spot, Mark. Okay, so again, there's been great discussion on here. I think staff has got the understanding of where we go. So now we've got a deferral on the table for the entire report. Any questions on the deferral? Councillor Bell, then Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been trying to get in for a wee while, so some of my comments may be besides the deferral. I apologise for that. But there are some specifics about the limitations on stopping around Penman's Dam that I'd like to introduce. So I'm happy just to speak direct to staff and get that done. It will change the mapping, and specifically I'm looking at the area just north of the railway bridge, where there's an entrance which is used by the emergency services, which during the summer becomes a secondary boat removal station. And with it, you get parking. So I would like to see that as no stopping. I just want to make the point that this is a trial. So when, you know, if we don't get it perfectly right, we shouldn't worry. And I think staff have done a great job getting us to this point. And I think we also need to remember that this is just trying to address a bigger problem. As the mayor said, this is not just about parking. So one of the things I would like to introduce is the idea that we write to the OPP and the GRCA and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Fisheries. I think they're the people that we need to write to, setting out concerns that we've seen about behaviours and the consequences of those behaviours on the river. Because anybody that comes down the river drinking, gets out at Penman's, then potentially drives. If anybody's been up north during the summer, you'll know the OPP do stops on the lakes, and they check people for the right safety equipment, and they check for alcohol. And I would like to see that we have something similar that complements the work we're trying to do on parking. And I would like to introduce that as a motion, if necessary, that we write to those three bodies.
Okay. Councillor Week to the motion to defer.
I'll support the deferral because I only wanted Glen Morris, but if we're doing the whole thing, that's fine. But I want to make one thing perfectly clear. It wasn't the cost of the permits that I was concerned about in the Glen. They They just wanted an opportunity to speak. The report's here, and they hadn't had an opportunity to speak with staff to comment on the report. That's not saying they may agree with this report. They just wanted an opportunity to speak with our staff, to comment on it, rather than have it put on the desk and we say yes or no. They just want a chance to speak about it. That's all. I'm not saying they don't like the parking on this street or that street or anything else, or paying for permits. They just wanted an opportunity to say hello, we like it, or we like to change a little bit. That's all was my deferral for.
Okay.
It wasn't about parking permits.
No, that's fine. Okay. So I think what we're going to do here, again, I think we all agree that it's going to take more than a week. And I know, Councillor Bell, you'd like to have some of your input in there as well. It makes sense. So what I'm going to, we do have a mover and a seconder. What I'm going to ask the mover and the seconder, are you good to have that deferral for one cycle, which would bring that back to the next admin and operations? That would give a month for staff to do their thing, to talk to the citizens, and then incorporate potentially what Councillor Bell was talking about there, and come back. Councillor Howes, you're good with that? Mayor Bailey, you're good with that? Okay. Any further questions that haven't been asked at this point? I think we've been around the table a few dozen times here, but it's good discussion. I'm glad we did, because I think it's put us in the right direction. So we do have a motion on the table to defer this report for one cycle to get community input. It is moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, thank you for that discussion, folks, and we will go from there. So moving on to 8.2, which is RPT 21-101 for the Winter Sidewalk Maintenance Program. There is a recommendation there. There's three options. Councillor Coleman?
Move.
Seconder? Councillor Bell. Any questions on that report? Councillor Bell and then Councillor Gatward.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully support the recommendation. I'd like to draw attention to the map of Paris and make some comments that we're proposing to do some work on Laurel Street to make that a safe access for children coming from the south end of Paris towards the centre of town. That will need to be blue-lined on the map. Likewise, near to the new community health hub, I would like to see that we also provide the necessary facilities to keep that area clean. And I have a bigger comment about the downtown. Of the three maps shown, St. George downtown gets cleaned, Burford downtown gets cleaned, Paris downtown doesn't. And I think it's an omission that we should address. It's not directly related to the purchase of the equipment, but if we have more equipment, I'd like to see those three pieces added to the mapping. Thank you.
Mr. Walton, did you want to comment to that or no?
So through the chair to Councillor Bell, the cleaning of the downtowns isn't necessarily as easy thing as you'd want, especially one like Paris downtown. But anyways, something that can be looked at as if we purchase equipment and monitor the roads. The area of Laurel Street certainly is intended to be added in there. We made that commitment to the school board when we made that. In fact, that one's going to show the route all the way to the Nith River and the crossing of the Nith as well.
Perfect. Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this is my understanding is that we do the sidewalks for school routes, so our children can get to school safely when they have to walk. And I'm in favor of the first option that Councillor Coleman moved. However, on page 41 of 47, or it was attached actually to the next report, was the map for Burford and Mount Pleasant. And Mount Pleasant map only shows the Mount Pleasant Road sidewalk being done. On Birch Road, there is a paved shoulder sidewalk that was colored in reddish colored pavement, and that was supposed to be the sidewalk for all the children coming from the Barnes Farm subdivision, which incidentally is not shown on this map, all the streets. So this map is out of date. And I would imagine there's double or triple the number of streets now in that subdivision. So I am requesting that Birch Road colored sidewalk that runs from almost the park to the corner at the windmill, that be kept clean. I had complaints from parents about kids standing on snowbanks waiting for the school bus because there was nowhere else to stand other than the road. So if we could add that one little strip when they're out cleaning Mount Pleasant Road sidewalks, I'm sure the residents in Mount Pleasant would find it much safer for the children. Thank you.
Okay. Duly noted, Mr. Walton. Thank you for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you would.
Yeah.
With respect to Birch Road, the way that's just actually asphalt right now. The way that area is cleaned is would not ever be by sidewalk plow. It's just cleared by the trucks as they plow the road. Generally, in a case like that, there would be some occasions where they would come back to wing it off after it was done. That section of Birch Road is actually proposed for reconstruction, and the sidewalk is to be placed there as part of the reconstruction. And the consideration for how this fits into the report would be as per the other criteria. That's how we've set these up before. So there could be some properties there where they get to the pleasure of cleaning the sidewalk once it's actually there. And there are some, I think there is some municipal frontage there as well.
Okay. Councillor Chambers, you had your hand up?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Rob, if you might. My concern about is not so much about snow clearing the sidewalk or snow clearing the road. It's the snow that accumulates between the sidewalk and the road. You'll recall an article I sent to you that a lady had tried to scale that pile of snow, which resulted in the municipality being sued and eventually ended up in the Supreme Court of Canada for a ruling on whether the municipality was liable for not clearing the snow between the road and the sidewalk. I'm wondering if you'll comment on that with regard to what's in the report.
Mr. Walton?
Through the chair to Councillor Chambers, this is sort of like what I started to talk about in downtown Paris, is that the clearing of these sidewalks in downtown areas isn't as simple a thing as it is in some of the other areas. So what you're talking about there is a snow windrow, which during our normal operations, we quite intentionally create. You know, we have to get the snow off the road. It has to be accumulated somewhere. We aren't using blowers and putting this into the truck. So in big storms and in certain periods of time, this accumulates. And in certain areas of the municipality, we eventually wing that back into ditches and into areas where it's not a problem. And in some areas like the downtowns, when it accumulates enough, we actually would go in and then remove it. Usually at night with loaders and trucks and the like. The area behind us, where we actually maintain with the sidewalk equipment, that's different. It gets pushed. That material gets pushed into the windrow too. I remember reading the article you sent me on the lawsuit there, and you know the big problem is here we live in Canada, so these things exist. It's just like, you know, residents that phone to complain and say they plowed in my driveway. Well, yes, you're right. It's time to go out and clear it out again. It's just a reality of life, and you know, as citizens in an area like this, we really need to understand what we've got to do to get around windrows and the like. Certainly, with accessibility concerns or whatever, it does heighten other issues for people that can't get around the windrows, that's for sure. But there's no real solution to that because it takes time to do these things. So these things will at some times always occur for a period of time.
Okay. Councillor Chambers, follow up.
Through you again to Rob, do you feel that the municipality, through its operational procedures and its policies, are not liable for people who will try to scale a pile of snow, fall, hurt themselves, and then sue the municipality, and then end up in the Supreme Court of Canada, which eventually, I'm not sure they have finalized their ruling or not, but I believe that the lower court found that municipality was not liable. The British Columbia Supreme Court found that it was. The Supreme Court of Canada was to ultimately make a decision on who is liable. But if the Supreme Court indeed finds a municipality liable for not clearing the snow and causing injuries, then we have to be very, very careful in what we have in terms of operations and policies according to what the article is laying out.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Chambers. So in Ontario, we have the minimum maintenance standards. I quoted in the report what the actual regulation is. I can't remember it off the top of my head. And that is used as a defense in any lawsuit. It can be used as a defense in any lawsuits that are brought about. And maintenance, winter maintenance on sidewalks actually does fall under minimum maintenance standards. So, so there are standards there, and we do meet the standards of that regulation for both road maintenance in the winter and sidewalk maintenance as well. The addition of the equipment and the personnel that have been added now to add into the winter maintenance of sidewalks will improve that situation, and I'm not concerned. I can't predict what the Supreme Court of Canada is going to rule on this case. That's for sure. I'd be foolish to try and predict that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I just might conclude by saying that it does seem maybe odd that a report like this before us tonight may indeed have such importance that it may sway the Supreme Court of Canada whether we are liable in situations of winter maintenance or not. So little reports like this sometimes have big consequences.
There you go. Mayor Bailey, had your hand up? You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say where my office is in Paris. I see these all the time, and I do see county staff doing their very best by digging little trenches and little openings for people every third or fourth car, and then the shop owners and the storekeepers come out and they do their own little thing too. So I mean, I know that the problem is very obvious, and I know that it's very dangerous. I've helped many people over those little mounds of snow and ice, and it's horrible because you do know, and you certainly do as the mayor. I certainly do when I'm seeing someone looking very awkward. That it looks like it's our business to make sure that doesn't happen. That's for sure, and that's why I go out and I help. But I've also seen many times county staff do their best if there's time to solve that problem. So it's not as if we don't know that we should. I just don't know that it's a policy that we do.
Okay. Councillor Ferrer, last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this question, slash comment, I think is for Rob, but through you. But what a number of other municipalities do is they charge a fee to specific residents to clear sidewalks. And I'm looking at, I'm seeing the additional, capital costs, which would be tough with the 6 extra machines, but it's looking like, $500,000. If you divide that by everybody in the county, we're looking at, $15 a year in service, in a service fee. However, what we're really looking at are folks in Paris and just Paris to look at for a moment, some have sidewalks, some don't. People would be paying that price without having the sidewalks and complaining. People in other wards where there aren't any sidewalks, or very many sidewalks, I should say, would be doing the same. So we don't have as simple a situation as some other communities where there are, mostly everybody has a sidewalk and they pay this fee. I guess what I'm wondering is when we get calls from people saying, the plow dumped, more snow on, and I'm older. I know some areas also have a service that you can sign up for that. But what I'm actually wondering is, since we're not going to go that route because of the inequality towards different residences, do we have a almost like a local services, private services that we can get folks in touch with, or can we have a list of those services that may provide services to residents? Because if we do it, you're going to be paying X amount per year extra, but you may want to just pay that yourself to have a private service do it, to clear your sidewalk or whatever it might be. Do we have it, or could we get a list of services, private services that do that we can just give the list without any no ranking or anything, just say here are some folks that do this in the area? Could we do that? Because I know we haven't had the success we wanted with our Snow Buddies program, and I know that's supposed to take care of some of this, but we just don't have the uptake on it.
I'm not sure we have that list. Mr. Walton, are you aware of any list like that, or would it be possible to get one?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councilor Ferrier. It'd be certainly, these contractors exist. They do all kinds of services like snowball people's laneways and the like, and they certainly would do the same service. So I think that there's ways that we could make that information known, or have people sign up to be on a list, so that then it would be nothing to do with the municipality promoting anybody. But we could, I guess, go out to the community and say, listen, if you are a contractor that does this, you want to be on this list, then we can could put you there. So we can certainly look into that. And the only thing that I know is whether or not our legal advice would tell us not to do that. We certainly would come back to you if that's the case.
Sure.
Good. Sure. Thank you. That sounds good. Okay, so I want to go back to the mover here, Councillor Coleman. I just want to confirm that it was the option one status quo that you were moving, just by the purchasing the additional. Okay, good enough. So it's for status one, or sorry, option one status quo is what was moved and seconded. There's no further questions. All those in favor of option one? Opposed? Okay, that is carried. 8.3, we've got RPT-21-108, Pride Month 2021. There is a recommendation on there. We did have our delegations report moved to this recommendation. Can I get somebody to move it to get it on the floor? Councillor Howes. Seconder, Councillor Bell. Any questions on this recommendation? Councillor Week.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To me, and I support June being Pride Month, but to me, for years and years and years, June has always been Dairy Month. And agriculture is the biggest thing in the county of Brant. And dairy farming in the county of Brant is huge. But I don't see the dairy farmers wanting signs put up in front saying, drink another glass of milk and eat another piece of cheese. I'll support Pride Month in June, but I don't know if we need to put up signs. Now, last fall, we put up a lot of signs in this municipality, the county of Brant, about slow down, children at play. And now, those signs are becoming an eyesore. At the start, yeah, people probably did slow down, but now you don't even notice them. And winter has wreaked havoc with a lot of those signs, and to me, they've become an eyesore. I hope that June is Pride Month signs don't become an eyesore like the slow down kids at play have become, because they are an eyesore.
Councillor Ferrier, question?
Yeah, just to, I'm going to support this, and by the same token, we supported a number of farming initiatives, and we do tour to farm, etc. We put money into farming. The reason that they're asking for signs isn't to eyesore your lawn. The reason they're asking for signs is because we can't do the things we normally do, and people want to still celebrate, and we can't congregate. So this to me feels more like it's a factor with COVID, a factor with not being able to connect in person and do all the events we normally do. The cost is actually less than, and I know that's not what Councillor Wheat wasn't talking about the cost, but the cost is actually less than. And you know, I drove by, you know, the other day, and I see the Thank a Farmer Today signs, and I'm happy about those, and I'd love to order one of those. And I'd be happy if the county paid for some of those as well for Dairy Month and delivered those. I put one on my lawn with my my other eyesore Slow Down Kids Playing sign. And my Pride sign, so I guess my lawn's going to be very full in the month. But the point being that I think the reason that we're doing this is a little different. Also, unlike this is about a month of celebration that most people have this up for a week to 3. This isn't the same thing as having these Slow Down Kids Playing signs, which are designed to come back year after year, winter and summer.
I agree with that last statement, Councillor, for sure. Any other questions on this, Mayor Bailey? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah. So I see the Pride signs like an election sign. It's up for a period of time, and then you take them down like you're supposed to in a timely manner. I'm actually quite saddened to hear that Councillor Wheat thinks that the children playing signs are junky, and they were designed to be up all year round, whether they need to be straightened up or spruced up or moved. Those kids are playing all year round, Councillor Wheat. And in the spring now, after the horrible weather, they're playing closer to the roads than they did when the snow was there. So I hope that they don't offend you too badly, because I'm still going to endorse and to push those signs all year round. So, but the Pride signs will be for an event, just like the hospice signs are up right now to support the hike for hospice. I see them, and then after the hike is over, they'll disappear. So I hope your concerns aren't valid, Councillor Wheat.
Councillor Gatward, last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I support the signs for putting them up before and a few days after the Pride Week, or whatever length of time people see fit. I just couldn't find any information in the report about the cost and how many signs were going to be ordered. And they'll be reusable year after year, so this is a one-time cost, is that correct?
Cindy?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the recreation budget includes some funds every year towards Pride activities. I don't know that number specifically, but I suspect it's a few $100, maybe, you know, at the most $1,500. The signs and the other activities involved, which are limited this year due to COVID, would all be within those budget parameters.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up, yeah, I remember hearing a cost for the 500 kids playing signs, Slow Down, and it was far under $1,000. So I'm hoping we can get a good price on these signs for the taxpayers. And as far as those kids playing signs.
Okay, point of order, Councillor Gatward. We're not talking about the kids playing signs. The motion on the table is for the Pride signs. I understand what you're saying, Councillor Gatward. We're not talking about those signs right now.
The ones in my neighborhood look fine. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Okay, so we've got a motion on the table. It has been seconded. No further questions. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on to 8.4, RPT-21-109, the Community Garden Partnership. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover? Councillor Ferrier. Mayor Bailey, second. Any questions on that recommendation? Seeing none. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed?
I'm not opposed. I do have some news on this. There are some
That is passed. Councillor Ferrier, very quickly, please.
Yeah, just there are some service clubs that are looking at donating time and money, so the price may actually be even less to the county taxpayer.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay, that was 8.4. Moving on to 8.5, RPT-21-110, the automated speed enforcement. There's a very good report there. There is a recommendation. Can I get a mover? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Bell. Any questions on this report? Councillor Howes, then Councillor Bell, then Councillor Gatwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, real quick. Again, this is more for the benefit of people who might be watching this later or hearing about this later. Just for clarification, we're not able to enforce photo radar all over town. We are going to be doing it in designated community safety zones, which are pretty much tied to where the schools are. But again, for further clarification for the public, just so we don't misalign any expectations, this will be enforced during daytime hours only. Like if you live across from my question is, if you live across from North Ward School, and if photo radar ends up being set up in that community safety zone, will people still get tickets through the photo radar system if they're blasting past at 7 o'clock at night?
I just suggest that it's still a 40-kilometer-an-hour zone, so I'd have to say yes. But Robin, are you able to comment on that?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, the first part of this question was related to where these cameras can be put, and they can only be put in either school zones or community safety zones where the posted speed limit is under 80 kilometers an hour, and those have to be passed by bylaw. So, so many of our school zones are in community safety zones, but a community safety zone doesn't have to be in a school zone. So there's a little bit of a difference there. In terms of timing of when the cameras would capture the speeders, that would be up to us as a municipality to determine when we want those cameras to capture. At this point, we aren't at the stage yet of putting those practices in place, so no decision's been made how we would move forward with that currently.
Okay, can I continue, Mr. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so when I was looking at the second page where it talks about the community safety zones listing where they are discussing the prohibition, I'm understanding that that doesn't necessarily dictate when we can run the speed enforcement. I would like to see us run the speed enforcement 24 hours a day.
Absolutely.
And especially in those areas. And I guess my last question is related to signage. Just like having a sign on your house that says "Beware of my big, nasty, dangerous dog" might prohibit someone from breaking into your house. I imagine that having signs on the outskirts of our communities that say this is a photo radar. I know we're not supposed to call it that, but this is a photo radar community. My question to staff is how soon can we get those signs put up?
Robin?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We haven't discussed that at this point. Legislatively, there is sign requirements to warn drivers that photo radar is coming, and then once it's there, that it is in place. In terms of signs at the entrance points into the county, I would have to work with some of the staff in other departments to get timing estimates on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mark, I've got you on the list here. Councillor Bell, then Councillor Gatward, then Councillor LaFerrier.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I have three questions, if I may. The community safety zones, we have relatively few, given that we're a county with 845 square kilometres of area. We have 11, apparently, community safety zones. I would like to suggest that we use the data we've been gathering through our speed spy work to identify areas that meet the requirements, being under 80 kilometres per hour, surrounding a community, and perhaps define some additional community safety zones. So I'm looking to staff to say, yes, I know that is possible.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is definitely possible. And as you're aware, there's plan to onboard a traffic safety specialist that will do an analysis of all the speed spy data and look at where we need to add additional community safety zones and whether or not we need to designate school zones separately. So definitely.
Thank you, Robin. My second question relates to fines. There's no word about fines and the level of fines in here. I think at the last time we talked about this, I think I made a comment that in Toronto, the fine levels were higher than the suggested levels that we had at the last staff report. And I wondered whether any further work had been done to identify the right level of fines, perhaps looking at our neighbours, for example, in Hamilton.
So through you, Mr. Chair, there's not been any detailed study on fine amounts. I can tell you that the fines are legislated through the Highway Traffic Act, and in community safety zones, they can be doubled from normal fines.
Thank you. Final question, when will we go live?
So through you, Mr. Chair, there's about a 90-day lead time. So once we get this report approved at council, then we begin the negotiations. We're already in the preliminary stages of having legal look at some of these agreements. So, but there is at least a 90-day lead time.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, Councillor Goward. Question.
Part of my question was answered, I believe, by Robin. It was to do with the actual community and school safety zones and the speed spy data, Robin. You mentioned that the crime or the community traffic officer is going to be analyzing those. So I guess my question was, will they be then prioritizing the worst areas for the cameras to go up first?
I think that makes sense, Robin.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, it's not an actual officer. It will be a traffic safety specialist that will be an employee of the municipality. I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Just if they were going to use the data from the speed spies that
okay. So yes,
prioritize it.
The plan will be to try and target the worst areas first. But we also want to be able to move the cameras around because they'll get, people will know where they are and slow down, which is what we want them to do. But we also want them to slow down in other areas as well. So the plan is to move them around, but we will target the worst areas first.
And if we have suggestions for new community zones, should we let you know?
Through you, Mr. Chair, at this point, you can let me know. We haven't started to my knowledge, we haven't started the recruitment process yet for that position. So yes, you can let me know.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Ferrier.
My question was answered.
Okay. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two quick questions straight to Robin. At this point, Robin, we don't know whether this will be revenue neutral, correct? As per our what we thought at budget time. It's still too early to tell.
So through you, Mr. Chair, it is a little early to tell. We do have a little information coming from other municipalities, and what they have found is the court costs are less than they anticipated. There's not a very high rate of people coming back and complaining about their tickets. So that is lower than was anticipated, and some of the bigger municipalities are seeing up to 10,000 tickets a day. So that's more than anticipated. So at this point, we don't know yet what our numbers will be here, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for it to be revenue neutral.
Okay. And then the follow-up question, given costs are unknown, there's a few unknowns. When do you anticipate we'll see a follow-up report to how well or not well this is working?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would expect if there's going to be a 90-day minimum lead time to get these cameras installed, and we probably need a couple months of data to bring back. So probably 5 or 6 months for a fulsome report with good data.
Okay, I appreciate the answers. Thank you.
Couple quick ones, comments that I do have on the report. Do we know, it states in the report that a lot of the municipalities can go together on the group purchasing at a cheaper rate. Do we know how much we're going to save by getting in on that sooner rather than later, Robin?
So through you, Mr. Chair. So the working group did go out for RFP. So this vendor, Redflex, was the cheapest vendor of all that submitted proposals. Part of the program, there's a daily cost for the camera. And if we don't have our agreement signed by July 15th, that rate will go up, and then that rate stays the same for the remainder of the 5-year contract. So it's about an $8 a day difference between if we sign before or after that July 15th deadline.
Okay, thank you. And the line I did like in that is the fact that, going through this company, they have their own insurance. So if any of them are damaged or stolen or anything like that, they're replaced or fixed, and there's no cost to the municipality. So I think that's a huge advantage too, because I know there was talk at one point in time that we were, potentially going to buy these things and all that kind of stuff. So I think this is definitely the way to go, and it'll be nothing out of our pocket. Other than that, full disclosure, I had the Police Services Board meeting this morning, and I advised them that this wasn't on the agenda, and they were quite excited to see that it was on the agenda and it's coming through. So I think it's going to be something that's going to be very good in our community. And as Robin says, there, it's pretty tough to fight it when you've got a picture of your car speeding through a zone. So that's good on that. No further questions. We do have a mover and a seconder for this recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That was passed unanimously. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to 8.6 for the Hartley Park status, RPT-21-114. Kathy, I'm not sure if you want to speak to this. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor? Mayor Bailey, seconder, Councillor Wheat. Pretty self-explanatory. Kathy, you want to speak to it? Nope. Okay. Any questions to the report? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Kathy. Kathy, I was looking at the map, and it's really big from my screen, so it was a little tough to see on the computer screen. I didn't have a physical copy, but I know we've seen this at the Accessibility Committee. We've seen this plan. This was quite a while ago now. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the accessibility features in this park. I know we mentioned at the committee level there, we talked about maybe having some accessible parking, as well as maybe a harder surface for the track or whatnot. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the accessibility features incorporated in this park.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. The pathways will all be paved in this park, and there are concrete type ramps that will be also in the playground area that lead into the playground areas. And basically all of the surfaces to any of the areas such as the courts or the suggested community shed are all accessible areas. And we did also talk about putting a parallel parking space along the frontage of the park close to one of the two main entrances so that that would be designated in a permanent fashion once the park is ready for use.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Through you to Kathy. Kathy, this part will be in the northwest side of Grand River Street North, up in that quadrant of new homes. And will there be another park on the other side when that builds out? And those will be the two parks for the new areas? Or how many parks are there planned?
Through you, Mr. Chair. On the west side of Grand River Street, we do have two other parklands that will be in the Watts Pond area. One will be a linear park between Woodsley Street and Hartley Ave. We are still working with the developers on that site. That could be expanded, but we do have some parkland there. Depends on what happens with one of the other adjacent developments. There's also a green space that will be right on Watts Pond Road. That will be an open space area that we'll have available for people in that area. And we will also be having a trail network that runs along the perimeter of Watts Pond on the south side. And on the east side of Grand River Street, that's unknown at this point. Just depends on how those lands get developed. And there are quite a few parks in the southwest area of Paris as well, at least 4 that we're working on.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. One question here, and excuse me if I did miss it in the report. There's 2 concepts there. Have we decided on one or another, or because the one has a pickleball court on the one end and the other has pickleball courts on the other end? I'm sorry if I missed it in the report, but are we choosing one, or are they both up for grabs at this point?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are recommending that the courts be placed on the west part of the park. The original plan was the second file that you have, or addendum. The first plan is the one that we are recommending, so it's closer to the industrial storage areas rather than the residential areas.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, no further questions on that report. We do have it moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Recommendations carried. Communications, we spoke to it before. We did receive 2 letters regarding the Glen Morris for the river access. Can I just, do we want to get a motion just to receive those? Councillor Coleman, Councillor Wheat, any question on those 2? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Other business, Councillor Gatward, you had something for other business?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of months back, we all received in our Friday files a memo about the 3 new fire halls. And this is a question for Cindy. I'm just wondering, Cindy, how are the fire halls coming along, and have they almost finished up correcting some of the issues and efficiencies? Or could we get a report next month on this?
Yep, so through you,
Mr. I was on mute there. Go ahead, Cindy.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just received actually an update about the status of the deficiencies yesterday, and we're hopeful that they will be completed within the next 2 or 3 weeks. I do have a meeting scheduled with Rob Walton as well as the project manager, just to get a little more detail about that and where that sits. I think following that meeting and that conversation, I can certainly provide an update to council via a Friday file to let you know where things stand.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm glad to hear it's progressing well.
Okay, so there was no other business. Okay, so the next thing is to go into camera. Motion to move into camera. Mayor Bailey, Councillor Miller, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We are going to go into camera. I'm going to trudge right through here, folks. So we'll just wait until we're off.
Yep, Mr. Chair, just confirming with Gary.